buddy Ian Mendes is going to be back in here. First time in a while. So
smooth, even takes, that guy.
Man. So,
and he brings a little ray of sunshine with him.
Honestly, we like Ian.
And a Michelob Ultra.
Yeah, we like Ian a little less about that.
Number one bullshit. Oh, number one bullshit.
This is Tall Can Audio.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome inside an all-new episode of the Tall Can Audio podcast. Matt Robinson coming to you from our studio in beautiful Bytown, Canada. Make sure you're following along on social media at Tall Can Audio and subscribed on your favorite podcast app. Whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Pods, wherever you are, there's a follow button, there's a subscribe button. Go ahead and hit that. Happy to be welcoming back into the studio for the first time, and it's been a bit, it's been a minute, but Ian Mendes is back. What's happening, man?
I'm ready to crush some Michelob Ultra. Just like the intro said.
Right. It's said with love.
With love.
Of course. Of course.
And I got to bring a ray of sunshine, apparently.
Right. Well, yeah. Someone's got to in the studio. It's all blocked out in here.
There you go.
It gets a little dark, right? How you been, man?
Fantastic. I got to say, though, like in your intro, you say, welcome to your studios in beautiful Bytown. Mm-hmm. And you're selling Nepean short. I feel like the listeners need to know you're a Nepean. You're in the heart of Nepean. I'm a Barhaven guy. I consider myself a Nepean.
Sure.
We need to pump up Nepean. None of this Bytown.
There's just something I find fun about Bytown, right? The historical tieback or something. I don't know. I've always liked the...
But where we are
technically
in Nepean, I don't think we're anywhere near where the original Bytown truly was.
It doesn't really count.
Right, no.
But all right.
But I love it. I love it. I love being here. Love doing your show. And listen, excited. So you've arranged some beers here.
I have. Something we're calling beers that we believe are Mendes speed.
Yeah,
which you're not a huge craft beer
potentially non-alcoholic. Is that what we're saying here?
We just know it's not. You're not a huge craft beer guy, but
I'm not.
No, so we've got a couple things lined up for you. We'll allow you to choose.
Okay,
just
so you got a Bose Lug Tread.
Yeah, figured.
Which is like a lager, I guess?
Yeah, it's a little darker than that, but not like a stout or anything. Just a little maltier, maybe.
A Farmer's Daughter. This is absolutely my speed. I've had
a great beer.
many Farmer's Daughter. The
had
white
a couple
water
on Saturday. They're very good.
And
then of course
golf course.
Yes,
it's a classic golf course. Wait, this is the same thing. Lug Tread. Oh, and the Michelob Ultra.
We did make sure that we had that taken care of, just in case.
You know, now you're tugging at my heartstrings. You know the Michelob Ultra. It's the dad beer of choice.
Right.
Once you turn a certain age, I don't know what it is 37,
I'm getting worried
38. You just it doesn't matter if you have kids or not. You just morph into dad beer.
Okay,
right?
That's upsetting.
Maybe
I'm hitting an uncomfortable birthday this year. So I'm
what are we hitting here?
Lordy, it's gross.
Oh,
right?
Okay. So listen, I'm 46.
I know.
You can't run from it.
No,
I'm 46.
It's coming down.
You know what? What's weird is that 40 didn't. I always thought 40 would hit me hard.
Right.
It didn't. I'm worried that in a few years 50 will.
Right.
But I'm sure when I get to 50, I'll be like, it's not so bad.
See, I expected that when I got to 30. I expected that to really hurt, and it wasn't so bad. 35 hurt, though. Like, that 35. Felt like you're on the back end now of, like, where they always say, 40 is the new 50, or, no, 50 is the new 40. I had that backwards, so that's rough. But, like, 35 kind of felt like, no. Like, whatever time shifting might be going on to allow you to carry on into your 30s is over at 35. So that one was hard.
I don't think 35 is the halfway point.
Okay.
I think somewhere between 40 and 45, if you're on a golf course, that's when I can comfortably saying I'm teeing off on the 10th hole.
Right.
Of life.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you're putting on 8 right now is where you are.
All right.
I think you're putting on 8.
I can take that.
Yeah. You got lots of time.
This is the ray of sunshine.
You got time. You got the time. You got to finish off 9. You got to go to the clubhouse. You got to grab a sandwich.
Right.
You
Probably
got lots of time
because I am getting a little old.
There you go. Yeah. You got to use the washroom. Yeah.
Right. I got 2 sitting here. It's early on a weekday afternoon. We may not get to both, but want to shout them both out here. The first one that I'm intending to actually drink here is called the Chalktown Stout. And like I said, early on a weekday afternoon, this is about 4.4%, so, a little easier going. This is from the Mississippi Brewing Company, and I've enjoyed shouting them out lately. They had a thing, actually, for our mutual friend Steve Bunda. A couple of weeks ago, They were selling beers, and the money that the profits they made on those, they were giving to a GoFundMe that's going on for Bunda's mom, who's been through hell here over the last little bit. We've talked about that on the podcast with losing her house to a fire and then being part of that construction company that defrauded everybody here a few weeks ago. So she's been through it. That fundraiser from Kitchissippi is over, but they've got a special place in my heart now. The actual GoFundMe is still up. That's always linked in our show notes at tallcanaudio.com if you can support Bonnie in any way. We love Steve around here. And
Steve is the best.
He's
Steve
awesome.
is phenomenal.
Right.
Now, wait, you said Chalktown?
Yes.
How, like chalk spelled like CHALK, like chalk?
It's I
Is
don't
there something
really know.
in this area that's called
I'm
Chalktown?
assuming that's the case. There must be a story behind it. I didn't look it up before we got started here. That would have involved some show prep. That's a little.
That's a little much.
Yeah, no, that's right.
much
And
for
I
you.
spent my time making that intro for you. And something else we got coming up here in a second. I do want to let the good listener know first, though, that on Thursday morning here on the podcast, Dan Schulman from the Blue Jays broadcast team will be here. And of course, from ESPN as well. The Jays off to a rocky start at best, but
No pitching.
No, it's been a little rough. As you and I sit here right now on Tuesday afternoon, we're getting ready to see Kikuchi after Berrios got knocked around a bit on Monday night. So
Berrios was not good.
No.
And I haven't paid attention to the Jays as much in spring training. I'll get into them probably once the NHL season
Sure.
for me wraps up with the Senators. But man, Berrios, I did not know what to expect this year. And that first start.
it was not
last
reassuring.
night was,
Yeah. So, Dan Schulman will be here Thursday to talk about all of that. And then on Good Friday, Michaela Schreider will be back. She hasn't been in for a little bit now, so we'll touch
Michaela's
base
in?
with her. Yeah.
Then it's not a good Friday. It's a great
It's
Friday.
a really, really great Friday. And we'll be in the middle of at that point, Women's World Hockey Championships will be underway.
Yeah, in Brampton this week.
Yeah, Marie-Philippe Poulin on the verge of doing a lot of things, right? About to become the longest serving captain in Canadian history. She's sitting on 99 international goals. Pretty good chance that's going to fall at this tournament. So we'll talk to Schreids about all kinds of stuff. It's a good looking couple days coming up on the podcast. So like I said, make sure you're subscribed wherever you're hearing us right now. Which of the Mendes speed beers have you chosen there?
I mean, listen, I got to go Michelob Ultra.
Yeah, okay.
Don't I?
That's totally
That
fair.
is.
That's fair.
It's
We
my
teed
speed.
it up there for you.
It's an afternoon, you know,
Totally legit.
that type of thing. Look at this. You're cracking open the Chalktown.
Yep. We're getting right into it.
There we go.
We got things to cover. We got things to discuss here. It's dry. It's a really dry
Well,
stout.
what did you expect? The name is Chalk.
Yeah.
What are you thinking
what?
it's going
All
to be?
That's pretty fair.
Yeah.
It says
It's in the name.
it's true. All right. You know what? Point Ian.
Yeah.
I lost that serve, that exchange. I want to talk to you about some stuff going on around the Sens.
Yeah.
But before we do, I am curious. Sometimes we go off the rails here a little on this show. I've been intrigued over the last couple of weeks, couple of months, with the uprising of AI and the idea that it's going to destroy us all if we don't get it back under control. Are you a tech guy at all? Do you follow these kinds of stories?
So I am actually reading a book right now, which is phenomenal, called The Chaos Machine.
Okay.
And I cannot recommend this enough. It is basically a look at how social media in particular in the last 15 years has really altered human behavior, altered the course of elections, altered whether it comes to vaccines or your disinformation, your belief in news. It's a fascinating book. I'm about halfway through it and I'm thinking I think I need to delete Twitter and Instagram. Well, Instagram's less of an offender, but certainly Facebook and Twitter as it pertains to disinformation. So this whole idea of like the AI thing that I've seen, some of this stuff is wild.
Yeah.
Now you're hearing stories of media companies in Canada talking about basically outsourcing news reading to AI.
Wasn't it just Rogers maybe on Sportsnet? One of their executives said, we're toying with the idea of AI sports talk within the next 5 years.
Well, if you're going to do a news read of that's AI, on some level, I'm not saying I agree with it. On some level, I can understand it. It's no different than voice-to-print technology, right? That you're reading something off a computer screen, you're having it read aloud.
Yep.
That's totally normal. That's fine. Where the slippery slope is, though, like you said, sports talk radio. That it's not designed for that.
No,
it's not, and it's a dangerous. It's a dangerous road to go down. Now, some would argue it would be a major improvement on the industry.
I have been toying around over the last week or two with two different programs. One of them, all the cool kids have been on way ahead of me, right? As I said, I'm pushing up against 40. My thumb is a long way from the pulse of what society's doing. But it's just this Chat GPT, right? Where you can log in, ask questions. You can say, write a story about this. You can say, write code to develop an app for this. What's the history of such and such? You can ask it all kinds of things, and it'll give you a reasonably good answer. The other one that I've been toying with is there's a couple different companies doing it now, but it's text to speech voice cloning. So you put in some text and it will read it out in theory in my voice, right? Obviously here in the studio I have many hours of me yammering into a microphone. If you can give it a clean piece of text with a voice, it will do its best to clone it and give you that voice, and then you can type whatever you want, which opens up all kinds of ethical...
Well, there's major... I mean, we are on the verge of a real ethical dilemma on just the idea of deep fakes, right? I don't think we quite understand the damage that has been done to... really, I'm gonna sound like I'm overstating it, but to democracy.
Yeah.
By allowing this type of technology to advance without guardrails.
No, you're right.
Essentially, we have allowed the internet to go as like this parallel universe that has run right next to our own, but our own universe is governed by law and rule and all sorts of
less and less so, but yeah.
But to some extent,
yes,
there are certain constraints on the way you act as a human being in this world.
Right.
On the other side, in the AI world or in the sort of the alternate universe, there haven't been those same parameters put in place, and now we're at the point where those two worlds are really just merging to the point where now it's one world and it's just pure chaos, and it's very, very upsetting. Like me as a person who prides himself in kind of journalism and news and information, that's the biggest issue I see moving forward is how do we, as quote unquote, if you want to call it legacy or traditional media, how do we kind of cut through that noise and present information in a truthful way when there's so much stuff out there that's fake.
Yeah.
This is the problem. And we can't just say, like, look at me.
Better, like harder and harder to tell the difference between what's real and what isn't, right? Like some of these software now, I haven't toyed around with it, but like you can make videos now. And like if you're an expert or you know what you're looking for, you can sit down and go, yeah, that's clearly a fake or whatever. But you're asking just the average Joe to get better and better and better at identifying when he's being, faked or when this is legit. It's a problem, for sure.
Exactly. And now the idea is that it's going to be used in very nefarious ways, right? Especially, we've certainly seen it, I think, in the political realm.
Yes.
And it's only going to get worse unless there's some significant constraints put on this type of behavior. You can't just say, "Wow, the technology exists. Let it go unchecked." It's going to damage people.
So, knowing you were coming, I got up to some nefarious things here.
Oh,
in the studio.
what do we got? A deep fake of me saying something?
Yeah.
Do you really?
Yeah. So I had my own voice run through it.
Okay.
And I asked. So I've used both pieces of software. First, I asked ChatGPT to give me a summary of your career.
Okay.
And then I had ChatGPT's response that it gave me. I ran it through the voice one, and I gave it your voice, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but just for the fun. So there are two questions here that I've asked, and then you answering, or ChatGPT answering with your voice. So on the other side, we'll critique.
Oh, this is like a little drama here.
Yeah, we'll critique the voices, and then we'll critique how accurate they were about your career.
Okay.
All right, let's run through this. Please excuse me, not at all terrifying future internet AI overlord. If it's not too much trouble, could you please prepare a short memo for me on Ian Mendes before our conversation with him on Tall Can Audio?
Ian Mendes is a Canadian sports reporter who has worked for various media outlets, including TSN, Sportsnet, and currently The Athletic. He has covered a wide range of sports, including hockey, football, and basketball, and has reported on major events such as the Olympics and the World Cup. Mendes is best known for his coverage of the Ottawa Senators, the city's NHL team, and has written extensively on the team's highs and lows over the years. He is also a frequent guest on radio and television shows, providing analysis and commentary on the latest sports news and events. In addition to his reporting, Mendes is also known for his charitable work, including his involvement with the You Can Play project, which works to promote LGBTQ plus inclusion in sports.
Thank you. Just one more question. Is Ian Mendes, in fact, Bush League?
As an AI language model, It is not appropriate for me to make subjective judgments about individuals. However, based on his extensive career in sports reporting and his contributions to the industry, Ian Mendes is generally regarded as a respected and professional journalist. It is important to remember that all individuals, regardless of their profession or status, are entitled to respect and dignity.
So it gave me a little lecture there on the way out. That maybe
so wait, does that mean that that's how I come off? Is like I'm. By the way, everybody's entitled to some respect and dignity. Now, I will give it a 7.5 out of 10 on the voice matching.
Yeah,
I felt like there's a couple of words like they were saying Ottawa and hockey.
So this is
which
one
I didn't
problem.
quite feel like it was the way I enunciate.
It tells
those
you
words.
up front it isn't. It tells you up front this is best suited to an American accent. So there are some words.
I was going to say like this is.
I think it hit the timbre of your voice pretty well.
I'm going to give it a tip of the hat.
Phrasing and toning, some of the phrasing, right, is not the way that we as Canadians would say it.
Yeah, and the other thing is weird is that, so I have never formally done anything for the You Can Play project. Okay. So I don't know where that came from. Right. But I mean, I'm very much an advocate of what they do in the sports world, and in particular in the hockey space. I think what they're doing is very important.
100%.
But that's weird. So that's all randomly generated.
I just asked exactly what it read back. Please prepare a memo on Ian Mendes before I talk to him this week and that's what it came back with.
Boy, that's okay. I'm going to start doing this with all sorts of people. I'm going to ask it what it thinks of my wife, colleagues.
So do you think that was good enough that like you and I can just go sit in the dining room and let the AI host the rest of the show?
I think if we were airing this in like Topeka, Kansas,
right,
then yes, that could pass as me. But
I didn't think it did a very good job on my voice. It has me a little more high pitched or nasally.
You're
or something.
Definitely more nasal.
Yeah.
I think it got the tone, but I think you're probably like me. Like most people, we don't love to hear the sound of our own voices, but because we're in the business of doing podcasting, we do often are often subjected to hearing our own voices.
Right.
Just whether it's recording, checking things, whatever.
Yeah.
A 7.5 out of 10.
Okay. Yeah.
With a slight, just leaving some room, like they got to improve a little bit on less of an American accent.
Right. And I'm sure that's coming, right? It'll just lean more towards your phrasing, or you can select a dialect or something. But for right now, you can tell.
Like what, I could be Australian?
Sure. Why not?
Actually, I noticed before this show started, you talked to your Siri, and you've set your Siri to an Aussie accent.
I have.
Well, what's the backstory there?
The American accent I find irritating, and not for everybody on Siri. I find it irritating. And I tried a couple of the other ones. The Irish one and the British one are both very thick.
Yeah.
And so actually the one I would have used behind Australia was actually the Indian accent, was the one I found least objectionable with how they...
But it feels like it could possibly be slightly offensive.
Okay.
Right?
Like you better use your own...
I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe it would be. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get canceled for...
Sure. Oh, God.
For this.
Anything.
Oh,
so
God.
All I had to do there was go back last week, the Athletic Hockey Show, grabbed a couple of... I had probably about 3.5 minutes of audio of you just speaking. Just
chatting.
Ran it in there, and that's what it came out with. So
okay.
We give this 5 years... You and I won't have to be here.
5 years, probably. In all seriousness, probably 5 months.
Yeah,
probably 5 months. They'll be able to improve that technology. But really, and again, not to sound too dire, but just in reading the Chaos Machine, it is really upsetting to see the way that human behavior has been altered by this, and where we're headed is to an even darker place when it comes to. Disinformation.
Right.
Not misinformation is just, hey, I got something wrong.
Sure.
Disinformation is the, intentional act of misleading tens of thousands, or in this case, probably millions of people. And it's certainly concerning.
It's a bad scene for sure. Look, there's a whole bunch of places we could start on the Sens, but I'm curious more from your perspective and in your job, what the last couple of years have been like, because on top of covering the actual hockey team, there's been the story you were involved with Katie Strang about what was going on behind the scenes with the Senators. We had the passing of Eugene Melnyk. We have now this sale. There's been an ongoing story about where the new arena may or may not end up. And as someone who got into covering sports, I'm curious whether there's been Like whether that's refreshing that there's all these other, and some of those stories are pretty down. I don't mean refreshing as in everything's been great news, but does that keep the job interesting? You constantly doing something else? Or is there a part of you that's like, man, I've sort of got into this to be like, Drake Batherson had a 2-goal night last night, and I want to talk to him and get some of his background and the game stories and things like that. Like, what has the last couple of years been like from a journalist perspective on covering this team?
No, you know what? It's a good question, because I even just said to my wife last week or a few days ago, because I was starting to dig into LeBreton Flats, and I ended up having to connect with a professor at U Ottawa whose specialty is Aboriginal title law.
Right.
And I got off the phone with him because I'm trying to just kind of nail down a couple of things as it pertains to LeBron. I said to my wife, like, how many other NHL reporters right now are connecting with lawyers whose specialty is Aboriginal title claim? I'm going to say I don't think there's very many.
I assumed today I would be covering the penalty kill, but here I am.
So, when you ask me would I rather be talking about the power play or whatever, you know what? I think what the last 2 years have done is it's really pushed me and challenged me as a reporter to understand that there are, just the way that things have unfolded in Ottawa, there has been two simultaneous things going on. One is the on-the-ice product, which is certainly trending in the right direction, and one is the off-the-ice situation, which, again, I think is trending in the right direction. But the two stories go hand in hand, and I don't think you can only focus on one of them and not understand that there's two stories going on. And so at some point, it'll just be back to one story where the on-the-ice product and the off-the-ice product are in lockstep and both going in the right direction. But the last 2 years have been really interesting. I would say that this last season, like the season that's wrapping up now, has probably been my most enjoyable season to cover this team in, I want to say 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it is. Like, maybe that run to the Eastern Conference Final was a lot of fun to watch the fan base get excited about that. The Hamburglar run was probably my favorite season to cover in the last 10 years. So, but this one would be pretty darn close, because I think what I was able to see this year was tangible signs of excitement within the fan base. And that's not just at the box office or not just with my own eyes. It's just you can feel it.
Right.
And people are tired of the negativity. They're tired of talking about the past. And I think we've done a pretty good job of putting a lot of that stuff to rest and to bed. And I think there's good days ahead. But certainly, I think you had to shine a light on some of the bad stuff in the last couple of years in order to appreciate where we are now. I think if you had just sort of tried to wash over this like it didn't really happen under the previous regime, I don't think you're doing anybody favors. Like you have to lean into what happened. You have to understand why it happened, and everybody has to make a commitment that will never happen again.
Right.
And it was really challenging for sure. Like the 2019, 2021 into 2022 for me were not fun years to cover this team, but this last year has been. It's been a lot of fun, and it's kind of back to, for the most part, outside of the odd First Nations land claim that I'm looking at, it's back to covering hockey and covering the things on the ice.
It's interesting because you can see it, like, obviously I'm here in the market. I follow a bunch of people. I'm talking to a lot of Ottawa media types, but I'm sort of, actively rooting against the Senators just as a fan, right? I'm a Leaf guy. You don't have to look far around this room to be able to figure all that out. But it is just from an observer's standpoint, even a place as dark and negative as Twitter has largely seemed, I don't want to say better than it has in previous years, but for a long time fans had legit beefs, right? Legit complaints. And I think there was a hope this year that maybe if everything went correctly, they could sneak into the playoffs. But ultimately, the more realistic situation was that they played meaningful games down the stretch. There's been times where they've been, within 3-5 points here in the last
3 points was the closest they've been in the last couple of months.
Do you believe that the fan base then would suggest and that's meaningful games? How late did it have to happen? How close did you have to get? Has this been a success?
I would say yes, with the caveat of now what they've done by having this season is they have firmly created the expectations that they have to be a playoff team next year. None of this. I don't want to hear meaningful games.
Right.
I don't want to hear that phrase. That phrase got overly used as it was in the marketplace this year.
Yes.
It's time to get rid of that phrase. Understand that they did take a step forward this year. And look, there's and I'm sure there's Leafs fans or fans of other teams are like, oh, way to go, you took a step and you didn't even make the playoffs. Whatever. Yeah. We're not here to judge the Ottawa Senators against the Maple Leafs or the Lightning or the Bruins right now.
Yeah.
We're here to judge them against themselves. Mm-hmm. And within that context, they unequivocally took a step forward this year. We can debate how big of a step. Was it a quantum leap forward? No, but it was a large step forward. They're going to end up in the neighborhood of 85 points this year.
Right.
To me, when you can, so year over year, it's a 12-point improvement. Okay?
Yep.
That's not bad.
Nope.
It's not bad at all.
Nope.
And you've taken yourself, I think what was really nice for the fan base was this year, I wish there was a way to like geo-track how often people use the Tankathon website. Okay? Because I can guarantee you in Chicago and Columbus and Montreal and Anaheim and Arizona and maybe a little bit in Philly, they were on Tankathon. And that's where we've been the last 5 years. We would go to it. It was probably bookmarked.
It was a segment on the morning show on the local
100%.
radio station.
And I'll be really honest, I think this year I went to Tankathon 2 or 3 times. One time was simply just to look up, because Tankathon's great. It lays out the draft lottery odds for all the spots. So even if you end up 12th or 13th, it kind of get like, what are your odds of jumping up?
Yeah.
So that, and I did spin it once when they were, I think they had the 11th worst record in the league, so they had a shot to jump up.
Yes.
And they didn't win the lottery. But that's it. And you have to understand where this fan base has been the last 5 years. We're not demanding, nobody was demanding the playoffs this year. We were demanding a step forward. They took it. But now we're going to turn around as a group of media.
I don't know.
And fans.
There was an awful lot of hype coming out of last summer.
I think though, if you
this is a playoff team,
so I think if you went back,
is better than other.
I think if you went back and you looked at my reporting at the beginning of the year,
I'm not necessarily suggesting you.
No, but I think I said most Ottawa fans would be satisfied if they were in the playoff race down the stretch and finish the season in between 85 and 90 points. Okay, that was my expectation for the team this year.
Yeah,
I wrote that in October.
Yeah.
I didn't write it now.
No, that's right.
I think through that lens, they're going to have met that. So, like me personally, I think this was a successful year on the ice for this team, off the ice. What's a little bit vexing though is you look at some of the teams that are likely going to make it, be it Florida, Pittsburgh, to some extent the Islanders. You look at Ottawa's roster and you say, you know what? Why couldn't that have been us? Yeah. That's going to be a little bit upsetting.
There were some birds there ripe for the picking, right? Washington falls out. Pittsburgh hasn't been very good, right? Like there were opportunities.
It was sitting there, and this isn't a year where you needed 100 points to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Your cutoff is probably going to be 93 this year in the East. That would have been attainable had you not submarined your chances with a flat November, where I think they only won 4 of 14 games.
Right.
They had a couple of speed wobbles here in March. So I think the good news is big picture. I absolutely think this was a good year. Like when I write the post-mortem of this team in a couple of weeks, it will be largely, I think it'll be largely positive, but there's going to be a distinct eye on, I personally will ratchet up the pressure on this group.
Right.
Like I'm not going to be sitting by and saying like, oh, well, let's hope you play meaningful games. It's you darn well better make the playoffs next year. Or somebody, and I'm not saying somebody shouldn't already pay the price because there could be changes. I don't know. That's well out of my control. All I'm saying is if you don't make the playoffs next year, there should be some people accountable for that.
Yeah, it's funny. I've talked about this a couple times before on the show. Last summer, I was with just about everybody who thought, Hot Pierre Summer was a good couple weeks of work that he did, right? To bring in DeBrincat and to bring in Giroux. I never, and you can go back, you can hear this on the podcast, but I didn't really understand the Talbot trade. Like, I didn't think that was a significant step forward, but I understood the idea of getting a veteran in here, if nothing else. Of course, Gustafsson then goes out and it's a pretty good season in Minnesota. But the one thing that I said a couple times, and I felt like I can't keep hitting this drum too hard because I come with some bias, right? But I said 30 points is a lot to make up, and that's what it was last year. They finished 30 points out.
Yeah, 27 to be exact. Okay. So, but basically a 30-point gap.
And so I said it a couple times. I do try very hard on the show to be objective when it's time to be, I'll poke fun, all these sorts of things. But when it's time to say, here's what I think is going to happen, you try and be legit about it. But I thought it was a huge amount of ground to make up. Now, I assumed Boston would fall back instead of leap forward.
Yeah. Instead of morphing into the 1977 Montreal Canadiens.
So I did think the field would come back to Ottawa a little bit, but there was still going to be a huge gap to make up. Now, as you've pointed out, it looks like they're going to finish about 12 points ahead of where they did last year. That's a significant step. You factor in how much time, like they could not afford to lose Josh Norris, and that's every team has injuries, all that stuff, no excuses, but that's a huge piece to be without for such a big part of the season. Going into this offseason, we'll see what happens. And what moves they might make and how this all comes together. I do think, and I guess the other thing I was pumping the brakes on was, can we see Josh Sanderson play a game?
You mean Jake Sanderson?
Jake Sanderson.
I'd like to see this fictitious Josh Sanderson
He's awesome.
play a game.
He's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Can we see Jake Sanderson play a game before we anoint him the next Norris Trophy winner? Now, he has come in and was everything the hype said he would be. He's had a fantastic season. So you start to factor some of these things in together. They go out and get Jake Chychrun. If they have a reasonable offseason, I'm far more comfortable this offseason saying, yeah, there's a good chance, as long as they don't bury themselves with that terrible start again, they'll be fine, right? I think they will be in the mix. And, people keep taking steps. There's guys there that are making moves forward. I just thought last season, it was such a huge gap, and I understood the fan base was fired up and excited, and what an offseason. Look at these names. It was still, I think, a lot further to go than some people gave that gap credit for.
But in saying that, and I'd have to look up the article, but I wrote an article last summer, Can the Ottawa Senators overcome a 27-point gap in the standings?
Yeah.
And realistically, you're not truly looking at a 27-point gap. It's probably more like 20 because, like I said, someone's going to regress. You're going to move up. It's not,
And the Panthers did. The
Panthers did. The Capitals did.
Yeah.
The Penguins did. They were there for the taking, so to speak. And I think, I look at this and think, okay, well, but New Jersey took that step this year.
Yep.
And remember, last summer, when they got Dougie Hamilton and they went out and did a lot of things, we thought, well, New Jersey was going to take that. They didn't. It was an extra year.
It's true, yeah.
So, there's a little bit
They were
of...
sewered by using like 7 goalies.
Yeah, and guess what Ottawa is now?
Yeah.
They could, on Tuesday night, when they play the Carolina Hurricanes, they're going to have Levi Marilainen start.
Yeah.
If Levi Marilainen wins a game, be it Tuesday night or whenever, the Ottawa Senators will tie an NHL single-season record for most goalies in one season winning a game, which would be 7, which is insane.
It's
not
remarkable.
7 goalies to play,
Man.
not 7 goalies to face a shot, 7 goalies to win a game.
Right.
So I think the feeling now in Ottawa, last summer, if you talk to Ottawa fans, they would tell you, I love the Brinket, I love Giroux, but I kind of feel like we needed a top 4D. Most Ottawa fans would have told you that.
Yep.
They added that guy late in the year in Jake Chychrun.
Yep.
If you go to Ottawa fans right now, and it's the middle of April or whatever, and you're starting to look at it next year, you ask them, what's the one thing on your bucket list? It's goaltending.
Right.
It's not even close. Like, it's goaltending. And they just simply have not had
What if
consistent...
Gustafson's available?
See, and this is the
Sorry, that's the thing I do.
Well, and that's the frustrating thing is you had a guy there who, when you traded for him at the time, you thought he potentially was going to be your goalie of the future. Now, it didn't. We can have a great debate. Would Philip Gustafson have put those numbers together in Ottawa this year? It's a fool's game. We don't know.
No.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
It's a different team, right? And
Different team,
staff,
different structure,
maybe a different goalie coach who said, hey, try
everything
this,
is
do
different.
that. Right?
Everything is different. It's like Mika Zibanejad. If Ottawa doesn't trade Mika Zibanejad, does he blossom into a 40-goal scorer here? Maybe.
Right.
But we don't know for certain.
Nope.
All we can say is, in hindsight, these were lopsided trades, not in Ottawa's favor.
Yeah.
Right? That's fair to say. And so this summer, the number one priority in Ottawa will be getting a goaltender who they feel like can play them 50 games next year.
Right.
Who is it?
Have you started digging around what names might be out there?
The free agent carousel's pretty thin.
Yeah.
Like Tristan Jarry might be the best available goalie.
Yeah. I'm not sold on committing to that any kind of term, right? Like,
so there's Jarry, there's anyway, it's not a great list. But it's going to be the issue for Ottawa.
You mentioned Zibanejad there just before we move off. Every year we do a couple different lists. One just came out from the PA, and it's Barkov is the most underrated player in the league. Like, he's the most underreported on player in the league.
Yeah.
I think we're done with the idea that he's the most. I think Mika Zibanejad might have a shot at that title, though. And he's in New York City. Like, if there was a chance to get attention, he has that chance. And we still don't talk about him. And he's had a couple great seasons now.
Well, I think part of the issue for Zibanejad is just when you look at his own team.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of the New York Rangers, you may think Shesterkin 1.
Yes.
You may think Adam Fox 2.
Yeah.
You may think Artemi Panarin 3.
Yeah.
There's
Isn't
a
that
chance
the point? We're underrated?
that Mika Zibanejad may not be the first name that pops to mind for you. So, yeah, absolutely. I think he's an underrated player who, boy, he blossomed into everything you'd ever want a number one centerman to be.
Right. I'm curious right now, the vibe around the team, fans are waiting to see what this is going to look like in terms of the sale, right?
Yeah.
And there's been ownership groups in and out. The commissioner was here. He didn't say much. He never says too much. He talks a lot.
You need to do the AI of Gary Bettman, and then just get him to say a bunch of things. That would get me
in a lot of trouble because I the things I might have Gary say here. I texted our friend Lloydie before he was going to interview him. I said, I got a couple questions, Lloydie. Hit him with, and he's like, yeah, I'm probably not going to do that. So, look, he comes into town, and it's in the league's interest to really prop this up. It doesn't look like that's going to be a problem. There's enough bidding groups out there. I wonder, as you kind of have followed this through, you look at the people involved, what is most important right now to Gary and the league? Is it continuing to push franchise values up? And this is already going to be, I think, a more lucrative sale than I expected, right?
Yeah.
This is already going to come in higher than I would have suspected. But is it push it up, because that's good for the whole league? Or do you think there's an argument to be made out there, and that they would be prepared to hear it, that sometimes take a slightly less offer or lower money offer for what you believe to be a better group? Do you think they would entertain that?
I think they would, but I think they could probably get away with both things here. I think there's enough interest in this that they can get to the number that they want, which I think will end up being north of $900 million. I really do.
Sounds like it, yeah.
And I think they can probably end up with the group that they want. And part of that, I think at this point of the game, it would be ridiculously disappointing for this market, I think the league in general, if Ryan Reynolds is not in a significant role. Like there's no, like you can't sell me. And I'm very familiar with the groups that are on the table. Mm-hmm. Like very familiar with them.
Right.
Do I think all of them could have their own unique skill set and make this a great place to own a hockey team? Of course. But there's one group that's a little bit different, or at least one candidate that's different. That's Ryan Reynolds. And he brings a factor in to Ottawa that I don't like. I think this is it's almost like what we're missing as a city.
Well, were you surprised that he tied himself to one group? I was too.
I was until I understood why he might have done that, which is simply, align yourself with a group that allows you to probably have the most amount of, I think if they win this bid, Ryan Reynolds is going to basically have almost carte blanche with the hockey team.
Right.
That's my feeling on this. And not to say that he's going to be involved in hockey decisions, but I think from a business perspective and a marketing perspective.
He could be Shanahan down in Toronto.
Yeah, but even greater than that. He will be the Larry Tannenbaum.
Oh,
he will be the
True enough.
The guy.
Yeah. No, ownership.
And I think there's something deeply appealing to us in Ottawa about that, because if you think about the psyche of us as a city, we wrestle with the fact that geographically we're in between Toronto and Montreal. Mm-hmm. We wrestle with the fact that we're in between two original 6 franchises. We are always viewed as the little sibling at the table, and we're never going to get over that because, quite frankly, the Maple Leafs and the Habs had like a 70-year head start. So we're never going to get a seat at that table. What we can do in Ottawa, and I'm speaking we, meaning like Ryan Reynolds, is you can say, we don't actually have to be at your table.
No. We're at the cool kids
We're going to
table.
be at the cool kids table.
Yeah.
And over here is why it doesn't matter what I
Stodgy
think
old stuffy old Toronto and Montreal.
Exactly.
We got Ryan Reynolds. We're doing cool shit over there.
and we can step away from the shadow, and we don't. I think for a lot of Ottawa fans, they feel this sense of anger. I don't want to hear anything about Toronto. You know what? At some point, as a city or as a fan base, we need to say enough. You know what? Those 4 playoff losses, the Leafs, they don't bother me anymore. All of it doesn't bother me. Nothing. Whatever.
Yeah.
Go on and live your lives. We're over there, and we'll live our lives over here. And we know that our city is probably a lot better to live in. And being a Senators fan is inherently more fun than being a Leafs fan. It is. Being a Toronto Maple Leafs fan comes with excessive weight and baggage.
Does it, Ian? I had no idea.
Yeah, and I think that we gotta, as a city in Ottawa, we gotta lean into the fact.
It's always felt so good. I had no idea.
Don't instead of being intimidated by the historical differences between the two, lean into the fact that guess what? We don't have to carry the baggage.
Right.
That's the beauty of being a somewhat of an upstart young franchise that's 30 years old. We don't have the history, and I think it's time for Ottawa to also lean into the fact that some of their history has been really good and really colorful.
Mm-hmm.
And they've made the playoffs a bunch of years, and they've gone to the Stanley Cup final, and they've had the Hamburglar run, and they've had Carlson, and they've had a Hall of Famer in Alfredson. There's so much to celebrate about this franchise. It's time to just celebrate it, to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Reynolds would probably do.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes if the expectation, I certainly felt like Ryan Reynolds had sort of had a meeting with the league. Just wait. We'll sort this out, and then you can step in with an investment of some kind and kind of be the public face of it. And I don't know whether Gary would have been surprised like we were that he went, yeah, no, I'm going to tie myself to this group.
Yeah.
But it does sort of feel like even if that group doesn't come through, they'll find a way to pluck him out of there and say, I understood you wanted to do that, but, do you still want to be a part of this?
Probably on his terms. So now you got to go to another ownership group that's going to be willing to let him have the type of voice and influence.
Yeah.
And again, I'll say this
right?
very clearly. If you're a potential owner of the Ottawa Senators and Ryan Reynolds is publicly saying he wants to be part of this, it behooves you as an owner to make it happen.
Yes.
There's nobody else that you can. The only other person I think you can bring in that has some clout is Daniel Alfredson. Yes. Alfredson's the only other guy that I think.
Is he, to your understanding, tied to a group?
No, he's not. And I think he's just sitting in the side. To me, the ideal scenario in Ottawa is you get Reynolds and Alfredson working in tandem. Reynolds runs the business side. Alfredson runs the hockey operations side. They're in lockstep. I think they would have the same vision of the way they view Ottawa. Mm-hmm. Enough of this comparing to Toronto. Enough of this comparing to Montreal. We are Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And I just don't know. There would be so much trust. I don't even know how to explain this. But the whiplash
out front on a press conference.
But think about this. The whiplash you would have as a Senators fan going from the old owner, and then you look up at a podium and there's Daniel Alfredson and Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah. Feels pretty good.
That's whiplash.
Yeah.
That's a 180, the likes of which I'm not sure that we've ever seen in professional sports.
I just want to slide this in here quickly. Mainly because it fits here. I'm about to have a beer from the Nita Beer Company, longtime friends of the show. And they have this one is called the Cockadoodle Brew. It's a coffee lager. Little coffee blonde, actually. But they, at one point, had produced Andy's father's name was Hans, put out a lager. Alfie's father's name was Hans. And so at some point, they were at some kind of community event together, and our friend Andy there over at the Nita Beer Company was trying hard to get selfies with Alfie holding the beer. And he was a good sport, played along, right? But I think it was a pretty thin branch to step out on together.
So in fact, it wasn't even a branch because Alfie's dad's name is not Hans.
Okay. Well, then that's a problem.
That's a problem. It's Hasse. Hasse.
Okay.
Hasse. So maybe that's why
Alfie was not.
Alfie may have been a little reluctant. He's like, hey, this beer is named after your dad. He's like, yeah, I guess.
It's not.
It's not.
To your knowledge.
There you go.
Does Alfie know anyone named Hans?
Well, I think if you grow up in Scandinavia, there's
there's got to be one
30% chance that somebody in your inner circle is named Hans.
Okay. Well.
Right?
Andy does have a selfie with Alfie looking somewhat perplexed about the whole situation.
There you go.
So
That's
now
the
we know
reason
why.
why.
Now we know why. Yeah, to me, it would be wild to suddenly have this thing turn on a dime. Hey, we got big financial backing, we got a new arena coming, and we have Ryan Reynolds and Daniel Alfredson out front. Do you think all of those things, at the end of the day, will end up on the table for Sens fans?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
One thing that I think needs to be crystallized for a lot of people, whether it's Toronto fans or people from outside of Ottawa who don't quite understand this market and don't, Ottawa's been low-hanging fruit for a long time when it comes to attendance and all that stuff. What people need to understand is this was never an issue about this as a viable NHL market. What happened here is a textbook case study in how an ownership group can demolish every single relationship that matters with politicians, with sponsors, with charities, with media, with players, with coaches, with executives. Like, let me put it this way. There would have been one point last year or 2 years ago if the Senators put out a press release saying they have cut ties with Spartacat. You would have been like,
sure they did.
That guy, you know what? It kind of makes sense. It reached a point. And having a professional sports team, like whoever it is, whether it's Ryan Reynolds in the Remington Group or the Andlauers or the Kimmels or Nico Sparks, whoever comes in and buys this team, you need to understand you own the team in paper only. The ownership of a professional sports team really rests in the hearts and the minds and the souls of the community that surrounds it. Mm-hmm. And once you play around with that relationship, all is lost. All bets are off. When you take that relationship for granted, you don't respect that relationship, you lose it. And that's what we saw here.
Right.
I don't think the previous owner quite understood that he may have been the owner in name,
right,
but he wasn't the owner of the soul of the team.
Well, the team's worth nothing if no one cares about it.
And that's just it. Like, you have to build that relationship with the community, and you have to treat that with so much respect. Like, you have to put so much emphasis on the relationship with your audience, that it trumps everything else. And when you don't do that, and you put your own needs ahead of that relationship, all bets are off, and you're going to kind of essentially distance yourself from the fans. And when you're asking people to invest their money and their time and their passion into your product, when you don't show them that respect back, it's all about that. It's just respect your fans and respect your marketplace. It's the easiest advice I can give to whoever's coming in as owner.
It feels to me a lot like where this team is going to play isn't still as in question as it feels like. It feels like there's a lot of posturing here. We don't have to go to the spot that we want. Like, it kind of feels to me, and maybe it's just because we've talked about it so long. Ian, you're closer to this thing, obviously, than I am. You've talked to more people. It still feels like LeBreton, as close to downtown as it is, the fact that they spent all that money, the city and whatever, to build a light rail station there, all of these things seem to factor into me to say, this has to go to LeBreton. If I was a possible owner, I might say, yeah, there's other parcels of land. How realistic is it that this goes somewhere else?
So I wrote in December that there were a couple of other parcels of land that I had spoken to people who are very well connected to this situation. And they told me, hey, this parcel, don't sleep on it.
Okay.
I reported that in December.
So one of those is over at Lee's, right?
One is 417 at Lee's. Another is kind of
by the ballpark.
There's ballpark, the RCMP, the old RCMP. There's Bayview. Anyway, there's a bunch of possible spots, but I was told keep an eye on a couple of them. And when I wrote that in December, everybody was like, "What the hell are you smoking? What are you smoking?" And guess what? Guess what's happened in the last 3 months? And these and I'm not. I want to make this very clear. When I say I put that out in December, that's not me saying, look at me, I'm smarter than everybody else. That's me saying, anytime you talk to people who are smarter than you, which are often sources in these types of situations, you understand that they have the vision and the foresight in December to tell me this is not a done deal. And guess what? Gary Bettman rolled into Ottawa on Monday. Perhaps his biggest takeaway message was a downtown arena is no longer considered the most something that is critical to the viability of the long-term success of this team. Now, is that potential posturing? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. 100%. You have to take everything people say around arenas.
A lot of money still up for grabs here. So
a lot of exactly. Take it with a grain of salt. But if you're asking me to put a realistic percentage on where the next arena is, I would not go higher than 50% at LeBreton.
Okay.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
And that's not me speaking as an individual. That's me speaking to you as somebody who's spoken to, I will say, about a dozen people in very high-ranking positions, either with potential ownership groups, with the Senators, formerly with the Senators, real estate developers, politicians, people that just know a lot more than me. And they're like, just don't marry yourself to LeBreton. There's more red tape there than you may realize.
I remember talking, and again, just to my old man, but he spent his entire life in civil construction, right? And I remember telling him he follows hockey, but he's not a nerd for it like we are, right? And I remember talking to him about LeBreton and throwing out, and I don't even remember it off the top of my head now, what the number of acreage was there. He kind of went, I don't know, I guess, right? And immediately there, I was kind of like, and I understand it was going to be more, and then the first deal fell through, and they have to then carry on with what they're doing, and now here's what we got left for you, all these sorts of things. But it still stayed in my head that, yeah, maybe if you're in this for as much a real estate play, like some of these ownership groups clearly are, then maybe LeBreton isn't all that appealing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, exactly. And one thing that's been really made clear to me, too, in the process is that even if they give you more land at LeBreton, let's say they go back to the original plan from 2016. They're like, you know what? Here's the 30 acres we talked about. You can have it. It's actually not your land. Now you're leasing it. So the idea, like for the people who say this is a real estate play, when I talk to really people in the real estate industry in Ottawa, and I'm not talking about, I didn't go to some real estate agent. I'm talking about these are the biggest builders in the city.
Yeah.
And I asked them, do you see this as a real estate play? And they're like, not if we're leasing the land.
No.
It's not a real estate play.
Yeah.
So that's what opens your mind to other sites. Like if you want to make it a real estate play and build up the value of the real estate, it has to be because you own the land, not because you lease it.
Yeah. So, last thing on this then, as we kind of look forward and move forward, there's been a couple timelines that have sort of come and gone. Nothing was ever made official, but it seems like this is taking a little longer to play out than maybe some would have thought or hoped. As you look forward, not all the dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's, but what is your sort of assessment of when we might find out, it's going to be these people?
I wouldn't be shocked if we see a conditional sale by the end of this month.
Okay.
I really wouldn't be. Like, I think the way it's going to work right now, from what I gather from speaking to some people close to the situation last week, is this week all the groups are kind of going back to their, wherever they live, their place of residence, headquarters, whatever. They're going to really kind of bat this thing around. What did we see in Ottawa last week? Do we like what we see? Was there any red flags and conversations, whatever? Then they got to submit a binding bid. And this is really important.
Best final offer.
This isn't a, let's dip our toe in the water and see what people think. This is a, we're going to, for lack of a better term, we're going to slide a piece of paper across the desk to Gary Bettman.
Yeah.
He's going to look at it. And if he likes that number, that's a binding deal. We can't back out of it. We can't say, well, actually, can we just get a pen back and change that 9 to an 8? You can't. So you have to put in an aggressive but plausible bid. Yeah. And I think at some point next week, so after Easter, is when I think you might see those second bids due, somewhere in that mid-April range. And then I think it'll take about 10 days, 2 weeks for the NHL to really sift through everything and say, okay, this is where we're going.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be shocked end of April there's a conditional sale.
Do you think coming with that, as we move sort of back onto the hockey side now, everybody assumes, we don't know, but everybody assumes when new ownership comes in, they want their own people in charge. Like, how long does it take? If you're the conditional owner, you couldn't come in necessarily, I wouldn't expect, and change management or whatever.
No.
Is Dorian going to handle the draft and free agency again this year? In your opinion?
Well, I mean, based on the current timelines, if they don't get to a Board of Governor approval vote, of which they need 75% of the board to approve, if you don't get to that by somehow have an emergency meeting, which they can, I believe they can have.
Sure.
If you don't get that done by June 1st, 2nd, 3rd, somewhere in that neighborhood, then yes, I would say that this current regime
even then, would June run 3rd, you're going to punt everyone out the door and then host the draft 2 weeks, 3 weeks, not host, but go to the draft 3 weeks.
So here's the interesting thing on the draft for Ottawa, and it could be neither here nor there. They don't have a pick till the 4th round. They don't have the pick till the 4th round.
Yeah.
So the idea that they need to sort of study this draft with the kind of scrutiny that maybe they would have in 2020 when they had 3 first-round picks, I think is a little bit far-fetched. But I think you want to have a clear vision in place. Like the new season starts July 1st, right?
Yeah.
Like free agency, all that. You'd like to have everything in place by then. So if you're going to have a new coach, a new general manager, whatever, that has to be done well in advance of that. So I'm going to back it up by a month and say if you're not at a place where you have everything in, kind of done by June 1st, 2nd, 3rd, then I think this current regime does get to survive at least the opening of free agency and the draft. And then, with a new ownership group, though, all bets are off.
Sure. Looking around some of the rest of the league then.
Yeah.
We got about, 10 days left, a little more than that in the season, maybe a little less than that, actually. What storylines still have your attention? For the most part, the East here, there's a couple teams in the mix. The West looked like it was settled about a week ago, and now it's not.
It's pure chaos.
Yeah. What do you got your eye on? What's got your attention when you're not watching the Sens?
Well, I think the Western race is the fact that you look at the Central Division, and really there's basically no separation amongst mini Dallas, Colorado.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Then you look at the Pacific, and there's no separation amongst Vegas, Edmonton, LA. I think it's extremely important you try and win those respective divisions. Because as much as we talk about Tampa, Toronto, or New Jersey Rangers in the East, the 2-3 matchups in the West are not going to be a walk in the park. I think if you win a division in the West, you're going to say to yourself, we could get Seattle. Yeah. We could get this inconsistent Winnipeg team. We could get this kind of, again, inconsistent Calgary team, right? I think so. That to me is compelling. And then I want to see if Connor McDavid can get the 70 goals. And I know it's a bit of a stretch, but I want to see him do it. The fact that he's going to bust 150 points is remarkable. And I'd like to see him try to get the 70 goals.
Let's assume, Toronto, Tampa are locked in. I think Jersey can still catch Carolina.
They can, but it sure feels like Rangers Devils.
Yeah. Those two games, Toronto and Tampa and New York, New Jersey, are on at the same time, and you've lost your remote. You flipped one on, and then someone's taking the remote away from you.
Okay.
Which of those two series are you more interested in?
I still think it's Toronto, Tampa, and it's terrible to say because I think New Jersey, New York has the potential to
could be an all-timer,
be a great rivalry. And you think about '94 when they met in the Eastern Final that went to 7 games in an overtime, and it produced one of the great moments I think in New York sports history with the Mateau goal.
Yeah.
And then they met again in 2012 when Adam Henrique scored. It was not a game 7, but it was a game 6, and that put the Devils in the cup.
Get the memory on you, man.
But it's just there's been these great moments between the Devils and Rangers in the Stanley Cup playoffs. You think, okay, this is going to be great. You got the upstart Devils. You've got the Rangers who've kind of been there a little bit with this group. And now they've added Tarasenko and Kane and all this stuff. But there's something so compelling about the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I don't say this with any degree of smarm or cynicism. I just think and maybe there's a really weird part of me that sees so much of the early 2000s Sens in these Leafs, where you have a great team and they're so good for so long, and you just keep running into the same problem, which is you can't get out of round one. And at some point it did break out for Ottawa, and they did get to a Stanley Cup final, but it was a team that deserved and should have had a lot more success. And that's how I look at Toronto. And I think they've built. I'm a big Kyle Dubas fan.
Yeah.
I like what he's built there. I think it's just so interesting that they're going to have to get Tampa again. They're going to probably get a 7th game at home again, and they're going to have to figure out. The way I look at it is this: I think clearly the Lightning have a goaltender advantage. And I think we can say to some degree, I look at this and I say Tampa is starting that series with a 1-0 lead, just based on Vasilevsky. At some point in the best of 7, Andrei Vasilevsky will steal you a game. So I look at this and say, let's just pretend we're going to game 2. It's 1-0 Tampa.
Yeah.
That's the way Toronto fans should look at this. Vazzy's going to steal one game. So I'm fascinated by it. I think this is the year that Toronto does get over that hump.
Like Tampa's sort of struggled down that, but it just sort of feels like that group is one. All right, it's time to go, right? And nobody flicks a switch except Tampa can flick a switch, right? Like it's sort of, and I do think it'll be compelling again. I'm not suggesting Tampa flicks the switch and just blows Toronto away. I'm not buying that what we've seen out of the last month or so out of Tampa is what will happen in the playoffs. It just sort of feels like that group knows,
well, they turned it around a little bit now in the last week or so.
You're right. They've been better,
but they've had some absolute. They got waxed in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago, 7-2. They look. The Tampa Bay Lightning deserve all the credit. They are the 3-time defending Eastern Conference champions, and until somebody says otherwise, I think you need to treat them with the utmost respect. Until somebody takes that title away, it's theirs. But they're vulnerable. Yeah. Like in a way that we didn't see them last year being vulnerable. And they've traded a lot of their picks and they've gotten
the cap just wears away at you over the years.
The Tanner Janneaus and the Brandon Hagels and the Nick Pauls and they're trust me, those are really good players.
Yes.
But it's not as good of a team as they were when they had Yanni Gourde and they had
Palat.
Andre Palat, and even to some extent Tyler Johnson was in that mix, and it's not the same group. Chicago fans will tell you how hard it was after you win those cups and
that final cup they had 3 defensemen.
Ladd had to go, and Byfuglien had to go, and like the depth changed. The depth has changed in Tampa.
It's funny after that Tanner Janneau trade to Tampa. Someone referencing back to the Nick Paul trade last year, was sarcastically saying, "Oh, Tampa, I don't know. That's an awful lot to give up for somebody who's going to score 2 goals against Toronto in Game 7." Right? Like it just seems to be they find the guys.
They find the guy.
Julian Brisebois
like
knows
Nick
what
did
he's
last
doing.
year.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to me. We had Hoffley in here. Chris Hoffley from Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group hosted the Monday morning show with me, and we were talking to him about this whole thing, and maybe it's irrelevant now because Matt Murray is hurt again. But Matt Murray's numbers being better on the road and Samsonov's being way better at home, like 18-2-2 at the time or something. And I said, would you ever be crazy? Like, is it just noise, or would you ever be crazy enough to go, okay, Game 1 and 2 are Samsonov's, Game 3 and 4 are Murray's?
If you go back and look at, I want to say Edmonton's first Stanley Cup in the 80s. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure, and I don't know if it was because of injury or what, but Grant Fuhr and Andy Moog split some games,
right?
Even in the final.
Yeah.
They were I think Andy Moog was the goalie that was in goal when they clinched the cup itself. It wasn't Grant Fuhr. And, a little bit in history we've seen, I think Carolina in 2002 when they went to the cup final. I think it was Artur Zerbe and Kevin Weeks that kind of
that's right.
Had a little bit of a.
I do remember Artur Zerbe in his gray, worn-out pads beating the Leafs in the conference final.
The odd time, it's certainly not the rule, but you've seen the odd time where there's been a bit of a goalie carousel, but within a series.
But never
it's very
based on
rare to
where
see.
The game
no,
was.
Exactly. It's very rare to say you would see goalie changes due to anything other than injury or poor performance.
Right.
What you're suggesting is changing goalies based on location.
Yes. It seems weird.
He does.
So, Ian, I really appreciate you coming in, man. I went back and I looked it up, and it had been October 21 was the last time you were in here. So
I was going to say, I didn't even know, have I been in here since the pandemic?
Yeah, just the once. Kind of right when we were first opening things back up. You helped us do that. It was October of 2021. So
wow.
It had been a minute, but we've tried to do it a couple times. You're a busy man.
It's been nuts lately, and I apologize because I kind of ducked out on you a week or two ago, but
things happen.
I said I got to make sure I get back in here.
Right. And we made sure to line up some Mendes Speed beers.
Mendes Speed.
The Michelob Ultra.
Yeah, that's
hopefully.
right.
And you know what? If it goes too long, and I can't get you in here again, I at least now know I have the AI voice who could co-host with me.
Totally.
Should you not be available.
There you go. You got to work a little bit on some of the phrasing,
Yeah,
whatever.
a little bit
but
of the
it'll be
dialect.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be close enough. I appreciate it, Ian. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having me.
We'll put Ian's social handles in the show notes, although I'm sure you all already know where to find him. His work is, of course, in The Athletic. We'll wind this one down here. Don't forget, Thursday morning, Dan Schulman will be here talking Blue Jays, and on Good Friday, Michaela Schreider will be in here. We'll talk all about the Women's World Hockey Championships, and Michaela's always down for a beer or two. She doesn't need the Mendes speed once. So we'll get to that with her as well. So stick around. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. With that all wrapped up, my name is Matt Robinson. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.
Number one bullshit. Oh, number one bullshit.
Why are you so pissy?